Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it is time once again for another edition of the Curtain Call podcast. My name is Michael Beck, your deputy editor over at BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, and I am joined by always, one Mr. Geoffrey Benedict. Geoffrey, how are you doing tonight?
Doing great, Michael. Doing great.
Beautiful. And as always, we're winding up our series of breaking down Steelers draft picks. We have another special guest here with us tonight from Crimson and Cream Machine, Kamiar Mehrabian. Kamiar, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. I'm just kind of hanging out, surviving with summer. I'm glad to be on the podcast. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, it really is our pleasure. Getting to know these new players. And to be honest, I would say Tre Norwood, who, of course, is our focus tonight, is probably one that I'm kind of least in tune with. So I've been looking forward to this show. To kind of kick things off here, I know Mike Tomlin, as he was drafting Tre Norwood, called him a Swiss Army knife, utility back, I believe was his exact phrase. Is he someone that's mostly a safety, or do you foresee him playing kind of every defensive back spot in the NFL?
You know, that's a good question because it's really tough to see where he honestly projects at the next level because, like you said, I mean, the guy was a 3-star kid out of high school. He played his true freshman year immediately at OU. The defense wasn't even that great yet, and he played cornerback, and the next thing you know, he's playing safety, and the next thing you know, he's playing nickelback. The dude played everywhere, especially over his last season at OU. He played some safety, he played some nickel, and he actually flashed some potential of having some soft hands and, jumping routes and getting in possession to make turnovers. And he's a Swiss Army knife, does it all kind of guy, and he takes it 100%, always the last one to leave the field, and that's why the coaches at OU always loved him, is because the guy, although he may not be the most gifted, he tries really, really, really hard, and that's kind of what his calling card is.
So would you, in coverage, is he more of a man cover guy? Is he kind of, you give him his man, let him do it? Is he more of a zone guy? Does he do both pretty well? Like, where does he fit in a coverage scheme?
Most likely zone, which vibes with what Pittsburgh usually wants to do, because man coverage, if he gets a step behind his guy, he's not catching up. He does not have that speed to recover and get back with his guy. He's going to need help over the top. He's going to need help somewhere else because if he even gets half a step behind somebody, he's not a guy that's going to catch up to his spot. So definitely zone coverage, definitely maybe somewhere on the nickel, somewhere over the top. I don't foresee him playing at a cornerback role. Or 1-2 in the future, maybe in a dime package he could play there, but I don't foresee him being a guy that mans up a lot. No.
One of the things the Steelers kind of were faced with this offseason was the departure of their hard-hitting nickel corner in Mike Hilton and trying to find a replacement for that role. With Norwood's ability to kind of shift around the defense, he's someone that could potentially see some time in that nickel corner spot. Is he someone that's afraid to get his nose dirty, or is he all about making those tackles, or is that not the guy that we should be trying to pencil in at that inside corner spot?
Yeah, man. I know I'm laughing about it, but like this is one of the things that really irked Oklahoma fans and really irked coaches for the first couple of years of his tenure at OU was he's diving at people's legs. He's not going to come up and he's not going to be the guy that gets downhill and just lays the wood on somebody. That's just not Tre Norwood. Now, that's his first few years in college. In his last year, he did show shades of, hey, he's willing to go run downhill and knock some dudes on their butts and plant some people, but it's not indicative of his entire body of work. Now, he had a new defensive coordinator his last 2 years. One of the years he had an ACL injury. And so this last year you saw him rushing up into run coverage, run support, and actually do those things. But for the most part, he drags people down. He kind of like basically takes on for a ride. He's not going to be the guy that form tackles and plants dudes. Yes, who knows? Maybe the Steelers can get a lot more out of him regarding because he's a hard worker. He's going to do exactly what the coaches tell him to do. So as far as what everybody else thinks in Oklahoma, He's not going to be a dude that's a hard hitter. He's not going to be a guy that's going to be really, really, really aggressive and physical. But, those things tend to change, especially when you get into an NFL weight room. So who knows?
You brought up his injury. Did he show signs of bouncing back well from that when he came back after his junior year, losing his 2019 season? Or was it noticeable? Was there a noticeable difference?
Oh man, he came back almost with a vengeance. It felt like he was a much better player after the injury. You didn't notice anything physically that was wrong. You didn't notice anything, any slowing of his feet, of his legs, of his speed. You didn't notice any hesitancy whatsoever in his game, and that was really, really great. And Oklahoma fans thought, hey, this guy's gonna jump on for another ride for Oklahoma's possible national title run the next year. And I think because of the injury, he ends up opting for the draft a year early because maybe he doesn't want to risk that again. But that last year, I mean, the man had 5-6 interceptions in the last 4 or 5 games, really playing on a dime, really getting a lot of playing time on the field, taking playing time away from other well-established veterans on the team. So that last year, he played really, really well, but everybody was surprised he left for the NFL after his redshirt junior season.
With his skill set, if you could only plug Norwood into one specific position, be it free safety, strong safety, corner, specifically outside or inside, if he could only play one spot, what is he best suited to play?
It's a great question. I think somebody like him, you don't want him covering burners down the field. You don't want him covering a dude like Marquise Brown, who's in the same conference or division. You don't want to see him running toe for toe with those dudes. You want him playing a little bit underneath. And so you could see him at kind of a nickel guy. At the same time, you could see him playing a little bit more free safety, what gives him a little bit more free reign. It's definitely a guy that you don't want manning up on the outside against NFL wide receivers, because although he is a Swiss Army knife, he doesn't have the speed and ability to really go toe-to-toe with some of the best receivers and playmakers that are in the NFL, specifically the AFC North.
So we've talked about he's not the most physical, right? He's not a hard hitter. He's not the most aggressive guy. And we've also talked about he doesn't have that speed and coverage. What does he bring? What are his positives? What's his skill set he brings that gives him a good shot to make it in the NFL?
He has this idea of high IQ, recognition of run play development, recognition of plays, where they're going, where they will end up, high IQ, big galaxy brain mentality, extension of the defensive coordinator, what he wants to see. So physically, although right now, not there yet. And maybe that's why a lot of people were upset that he didn't come back to Oklahoma for another year. I mean, the coaches were begging him to come back for another year. But as far as ball skills, he's got those. He has incredibly soft hands, great ball skills, reads the quarterback's eyes relatively well, and knows where plays are going. Play recognition, that's where he's at. And I think that's what made him a really, really good fit for Oklahoma down the stretch. And I think that's what can make him a really good fit for the Steelers. Maybe not this year, but going down the line as far as what you would expect to see in the AFC North with guys like Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow and all the other guys, Baker Mayfield.
So the Steelers this offseason have definitely tried to add kind of bulk when it comes to that defensive back position. And really their starters are pretty kind of defined already. You can kind of pencil in the day one guys, basically how it kind of sat last year with a couple different changes. But really for Norwood to make this team this year, he's going to have to show something on special teams. Do you see him as someone that could be a gunner or make any sort of an impact running down the field trying to cover kicks?
I foresee Tre Norwood doing anything and everything possible to get on that field, because that's just the kind of player he is. He's not a diva. He's not a guy that, everything's about him. He's not the kind of defensive back that we all know who these defensive backs are. The quarterback overthrows a wide receiver, and all of a sudden the DB's like signaling like incomplete and celebrating despite not doing literally anything on the play. He's not that guy. He's that proverbial carry your lunch pail to work kind of defensive back. He's going to be a guy that wants reps upon reps upon reps to get on the field. And if the coaches ask him, hey, your only opportunity right now is to be a gunner to get on to special teams, he will do it. And I imagine he's going to bulk up a little more for that. I mean, before his injury, the man was about 175. And after his ACL injury came back as a redshirt junior, about 190 pounds. So he did bulk up. And I imagine he's going to do a little bit more of the same, of course, in the steel weight room. So, yes, I 100% expect him to be on special teams just to get his nose wet and see where it takes it from there.
Did he play special teams in Oklahoma when he was younger?
He did not, actually. His first 2 years, he did not play special teams just because of his missed tackles. And, again, he's not taking guys to the ground from form tackling. He's a guy that rides waists and takes him down like that. And then his last year, I think they viewed him too much of an injury risk to go on special teams just because of how limited their depth was at defensive back with those two in tandem. So I think he'd be willing to. I think it would be a smart place for him to develop some physicality too. And I think, again, he will do anything to get on that field, and that's what coaches love about him.
A little bit earlier, you did mention that he racked up a number of interceptions at the end of the 2020-2021 season. Is he a guy that's a turnover-forcing machine? Is he someone that's knocking fumbles out, or is he just more of that ball hawk? Or was it a combination of him just being really lucky and the ball just kind of popping into his hands? What do you see for him as kind of a turnover producer?
It's a great question. And one of the things that makes him pretty special is his ability to read where the play is going, but also what the quarterback is doing with his eyes. Like Kyle Trask, he's one of the major quarterbacks that was supposed to be in college football this past year at Florida. And this man just picked six Kyle Trask to the house just by looking at his eyes. I mean, he's not a ball hawk by any means. He's not going to go and develop his own island. There's not going to be Norwood Island anytime. But what he is going to do is he's going to, anytime the receiver catches the ball, he's going to try to strip it. He's going to try to swipe the ball. And hence, that's another reason why likely he didn't have that many tackles to the ground the first chance. And secondly, he is going to try to go for that interception, but only when it's readily available to him. I don't think he's going to be a guy that tries to force the issue, which would get him in trouble, because he ranked pretty high on the team as far as defensive efficiency just by not letting players get behind him a lot. He kept the play in front of him almost the entire time. So when fans would go around and say, like, oh, this guy sucks, of course, his first couple years, his last year was fantastic. People didn't realize he kept the play in front of him, and that's what made him grade out so high every single time, because he wasn't letting guys get past him.
You mentioned him trying to strip the ball when receivers catch it. One thing that stood out to me on film is that he does fight for the ball, and any time he's on a receiver, he is fighting to break up that catch, which has led to some pretty nice plays, but has also led to some pass interference penalties. Can you talk about that balance and how he kind of walks that line between making the physical plays, fighting for every catch, but also getting caught on the wrong side of that?
I wonder if that is a interesting kind of development just because of his last year at OU, because OU defensive back, it's interesting. They're kind of caught in this weird kind of time shift where you go from Mike Stoops as a defensive coordinator where they're just giving up tons and tons of yards to just say, hey, just strip the ball, to this new defensive coordinator in Alex Grinch that's aggressive, strip the ball, do anything you can, borderline, just shove the receiver down. And so I think he's just walking the fine line of what he was being coached to do at OU as far as being ultra aggressive. And I think if it's actually him playing, he's more likely to err on the side of caution. However, if the Steelers are going to go and tell him, hey, we want you to do the exact same thing that you did in Oklahoma, he will do the exact same thing for you. He's not a guy that's always gotten into pass interference trouble. He's not a guy that's always been holding on to wide receivers his entire tenure at OU. He's been a guy that's always fought for the ball, like you suggested. And so I would say that he's more likely to play it safe and just keep the play in front of him. He's more likely to be happy with a 4-yard completion than something down the field that risks a 15-yard penalty. But again, he's going to do what the coaches tell him to do. And again, that I said a million times, that's why the coaches love him, because he takes their coaching as much as anybody, and he just soaks it up like a sponge.
So clearly there's a lot of good things to like about Tre Norwood here, but I guess my kind of thought on this is, why did he last so long into the 7th round? Why wasn't he drafted higher? What kept him from being kind of one of these, day 1 or day 2 draft picks?
I think it's the lack of speed. I think, again, if he's lined up with a guy that is incredibly fast, a guy that definitely is going to beat him, and a guy that maybe hasn't beat, he's not going to recover, and it's going to be lights out unless he has safety help over the top. He also has a lack of physicality, and we've known that he's dove at people's feet several times. I mean, heck, one time in the college football playoff, this man made a business decision, and he just simply dove out of bounds out of the play. And so that's what you kind of notice his freshman year, sophomore year, and you're like, whoa, come on, man, this is football. And so the lack of physicality, the lack of maybe major speed, along with that ACL, man, it was obvious to see him fall down. I didn't expect him to get drafted. I was so surprised when he got drafted, and nonetheless, I'm a fan of the Steelers, to be drafted by my favorite team. I thought a lot of people thought he should come back. The coaches thought he should have come back, and that he maybe would have been a top 5, top 4 round selection. But here we are. He got drafted in the 7th round. But again, it's just the idea of, he's not a guy that's going to, right as we see it, a guy that's going to come down and run support. He's not that physical yet. He's not a guy that's going to run foot for foot with Marquise Brown, who's in the same division. He's not a guy that is really, really going to change the game for you, but he's going to be a reliable guy in the future if he holds up in coverage what he's being coached to do.
Is there any, you have, of course, mentioned the Kyle Trask interception in, I think it was the bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other memorable games or plays that really stand out that were kind of defining plays? Or is he a guy who, like you said, is more efficient, but doesn't really make those big game-changing plays very often?
That's a great question. And there are a couple games that come to mind where he would just be ball hawking over the middle of the field, because, again, he's played so many positions in the defensive backfield over the last few years, especially this last year. And a couple things, he had a couple 2 interception games, but again, like you said, he's a guy that's sets his own pace. I mean, even to the point where, instead of risking injury, even to the point, instead of maybe being ultra aggressive, instead of getting 10, 15 yards more on interception, just step out of bounds and let the offense take care of it. So the guy's very self-aware of his body, maybe very self-aware of what his injury was the year prior. And so he's going to be a guy that isn't going to be a game changer, but is going to be a solid piece, maybe, that's what he can grow into.
As we've kind of gone through the couple weeks here of breaking down these Steelers draft picks, one thing's kind of stood out to me is that pretty much every single one of them has been described with having leadership qualities for their team. I'm curious if Tre Norwood also fits that bill, if he was a leader on that Oklahoma defense or that entire team in general. Was he a guy that would kind of stand out in front of the crowd and rah, or was he still, did he lead in other ways, or is that not even a way you would describe him at all?
I think he would be a leader by example sort of guy. He's not an alpha male, big silverback kind of guy that's in the middle of everything. He, at the same time, while he was at OU, he had a first-round linebacker, middle linebacker, and Kenneth Murray, who's at the Chargers now. And so they already had that kind of alpha presence. And in the defensive backfield, his partner in crime, I guess you might say, the other Trey Brown, is with the Seahawks. And so he didn't really have to be that sort of guy. He was a very, very, I would say he was a very, very good supporting cast role player, and he's not going to be he wasn't a guy that everybody immediately thought of when he thought of this Oklahoma defense the last 2 years, especially this last year. But he was a guy that you saw, man, he's making plays, especially the second half of the season. He's really caught on. It got to the point where he took several snaps from a lot of other players on the field at the end of last season that, man, it really started to click. And also he's 15 to 20 pounds heavier, and he's really laying the wood. And that's something that we didn't see the 2 years prior in his gameplay. So that's why people thought he would come back to Norman. So no, not necessarily a leader on the field that we all noticed, but who knows? I mean, he may be in a different place where he's learning from different guys. That might be different. He just wasn't that guy.
Okay, I wanted to bring up something because I did the breakdown on him when we drafted him, and I noted that the season he was out, Oklahoma's defense was struggled, especially in the pass defense. Specifically, in 2019 when he wasn't playing, they allowed the second most passing touchdowns in the Big 12. He comes back in 2020, and they allow the lowest. They went from 7 interceptions to 2019 to 15 in 2020, and he had 5 of those himself. Was there? I know you've talked about changing defense coordinators. Was this a place where the system changed and he really fit the new system, or was it? Was he that big of an impact? Was he a big part of that impact himself? Just that presence in the secondary.
I would say a little bit of both. His first 2 years at OU, they were dead last in defense, like in the college football ranks. They were just god awful, giving up 30, 40 points a game. The year he was out, I think they were top 50, but still giving up passing touchdowns, but not much in the run game. And then that last year, really all putting it together. He comes back 15, 20 extra pounds, and he starts clicking. And so he really, really fit and vibed what Coach Alex Grinch did with him. They simplified the defense. They said, hey, here's a wristband. Here are the plays. Go out and make some plays. Play as aggressive as you can. If you get a 15-yard penalty, that's better than a 30-yard gain down the field. That's okay. And so that's something that he really, really vibed with. That's something that he really worked well with. And that's part of what's going on down in Oklahoma as far as the defensive turnaround is having guys play really fast, having guys play with their hair on fire. And I think he really did fit the scheme of what they're trying to do. So I agree to an extent as far as was he a guy that they missed? Yes, because he got hurt in summer practice 2019, and Coach Alex Grinch was really down. He was very upset about that because he had a lot of plans for Tre Norwood because, like we said, he's a Swiss Army knife. The guy can play everywhere. And then that following year, he kind of shows you why they were excited, because he can do a lot of things for you, especially when he feels very comfortable with the system.
So, Kamiar, you are a Steelers fan, so I'm curious your perspective on this one. Do you think Tre Norwood is going to make this team? Is he someone that's more of a practice squad guy, or do you think he could be someone that ends up getting cut, then kind of picked up next offseason?
It's a great question. When he was drafted, I thought Oklahoma was done for their day. I thought Oklahoma was done for their entire draft. And then I saw Steelers pick up Tre Norwood, and I thought, man, does Tre Norwood really fit the Steelers defense that I've always grown up to know as this hard-nosed dudes making plays after play after play, killing the run game? And I thought, that's not the Tre Norwood I know. But at the same time, it just comes back to this guy would stay hours after practice getting an extra work with his coaches. And so I could easily see him being a practice squad guy that gets elevated. I could easily see him being a guy that could be cut but would be brought back maybe once or twice later on in their career or filtered out through the grapevine to other teams. But at best, as of now, just from what I've seen, he's a guy that plays on special teams, at best for me. Now, I know you guys talked about maybe him possibly being that fourth guy in dime packages just because the Steelers are strapped for cash right now because of a lot of other reasons. So I could see him being a fourth guy just because of the money situation at Pittsburgh. But at the same time, best case scenario for him on that team, I think it'd be special teams, and they go from there.
Yeah, actually, I want to add on to that a little hope here. He has actually gotten complimented from Terrell Austin about how fast he picks up the defense and that he can play a slot cornerback and also safety, which has stood out to me, especially even watching his film, how he played slot and safety was almost identical to how the Steelers used Cameron Sutton last year. So watching that, I'm watching it. I'm thinking, wow, okay, so this guy's going to come in, and Cameron Sutton's another dude who, he's faster than Norwood, but he's also not the best, physically at being physical and hitting people. He's improved on that over the years as well. Like, he's another guy in that kind of a mold. So Tre Norwood kind of comes across to me as like Cameron Sutton. What he was is where the Steelers see Tre Norwood possibly becoming that kind of, dime package. You're a slot cornerback. You're a deep safety. You're kind of a hybrid role in there. Do you agree with me? Does that fit what he did in college? Because I didn't watch. I mean, I watched like 2 games. And do you think that with that, is there a chance with his intelligence and ability to learn the defense that he could slip on the roster as a guy that they can sit there and say, well, like, even if we have an injury, we know this guy, he'll know the defense. He'll be able to go out there and execute it mentally.
And yeah, that's the thing about him, is that he is such a quick learner. And just watching this team over this last season in 2020, 2021, you can never really pinpoint where he was going to play because Alex Grinch filtered in so many defensive backs, and Tre Norwood was one of the guys they played so many times. At times he'd be at nickel, at times he'd be at cornerback, at times he'd be at safety, and it's like, what is going on here? So he's making plays all over the field, and that honestly helps him in learning the entire defense. And so he is such a smart player. That's how he got on the field as a true freshman. And they let him make they let him learn and those mistakes that he had as a freshman. And then he gets a defensive coordinator that says, hey, play with your hair on fire, go play aggressive, but also you need to learn this defense. And so, I mean, the guy is a bookworm as far as the playbook is concerned. And I could see him being a guy that, hey, if the Steelers, like, gosh, remember that one year that pretty much the entire defensive backfield was just like on the injury list? They were picking guys from University of Pittsburgh pretty much. He could be a guy that could fill in and be really, really successful because he knows the ins and outs of the playbook, because he's going to study that thing. He's going to do whatever the coaches tell him to do so he can get on the field. That's his prerogative. He may not be the most strong guy, may not be having the elite speed, but he has like big brain mentality. He is going to make the high IQ plays.
If you had to pinpoint one specific thing from Tre Norwood that's the best part of his game, what would you point to specifically that you would say this is what he does better than anything else?
Play development, recognizing where plays are going and where the ball is going to end up at. I would say that's definitely where he would excel the most, just because of how much of a high IQ he has for the game, but also B, how many positions he's played successfully. I mean, his freshman year, he played cornerback, and then he played nickelback, and then he played a lot of safety. So he knows where the ball's going, and that's what I would say. He's a high IQ guy.
All right. You got anything else, Michael?
No, I know you wanted to ask some Steelers questions, though, Geoffrey. Is there one that you wanted to send as well?
That was it. I asked it.
Okay.
Cameron Sutton one. Like, no, that's my thing. I watched him and I thought, this guy looks like he's playing Cameron Sutton's role. That's like, he's playing that role, and now Cameron Sutton's not playing that role now. That role is wide open, and there's not a lot of players on the Steelers who are really fit that well. So I think really he has a good shot, not of being the number 4 corner, but of being like the guy right behind like an Arthur Mollett, someone like that who's playing that job. And, someone goes down, boom, he's your number 4 guy all of a sudden.
Kamiar, I will offer you this and put you on the spot a little bit before we let you get out of here. Considering you are a Steelers fan, how do you think this season is going to play out for them? Are they a playoff team, or are they a team taking a step back? Where do you kind of rank this team right now? This is a tough question.
Oh, man. You are putting me on the spot. It's tough. It's really tough to gauge that, especially like down here in Oklahoma. I get Dallas Cowboy coverage everywhere, so I have to really go out of my way to find anything from the Steelers, and anything that comes from the AFC North down here is all Baker Mayfield, and you guys know why. Like OU, the Baltimore Ravens are all OU guys. Joe Mixon at the Cincinnati is an OU guy. But man, how I see this team playing out is I really hope the offensive line gets its crap together. Otherwise, Najee Harris is not going to make that big of a difference. I know they want to get the ball out of Ben's hand a little bit more. I know they want to do a little bit more play action, but I have thoughts on Ben and that he should have been put to pasture a while ago. He's holding the franchise like hostage with that much cash. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if they went 8-8. I know it's a cop-out answer. I know that, the Browns are looking to take a step forward. The Ravens are looking to take a step forward despite the fact that Lamar Jackson is not being able to be filmed while throwing the ball anymore. So, I could see 8-8, but I could also see 10-6 because of the defense. So it's just, man, that whole offseason stuff with Juju, getting another running back in, and Ben coming back and him, like, I don't know. I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic, but I'm just not too sure. I mean, what do you guys think?
Yeah, there's a lot, like you nailed it. There's a lot of question marks, especially like we're talking Tre Norwood here. One of the reasons I've thought about him so much is because we're down secondary players. We're down two of our main cornerbacks from last year. We're down, like you said, the offensive line is a huge question mark. Up here, there's a ton of optimism because they got rid of some coaches. So you got to hope that, hey, if the offensive line coach and the offense coordinator were kind of holding this offense back, and then the defensive fill-ins, if guys like Alex Highsmith and the defensive backs can pull it together, we could be something. We could really be that team. But yeah, I could also see where if we're a year away from that offensive line being good, then this isn't the year. This isn't going to be a great year.
Yeah, and I'm a little nervous for the quarterback situation after Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, like, as a Sooner fan, I hate Mason Rudolph, and I just generally don't like him as a quarterback in general. When what's his face from the Browns decided to take him and try to throw it at Mason Rudolph, I was like, you know what? He threw 3 interceptions, and I don't really like the guy anyway, so I'm cool with it.
How do you feel about James Washington? You like James Washington?
See, that's the thing. It's so alarming to me that season that Ben went out so early, that Mason Rudolph could not make any sort of connection with his college buddy that they were like they were running mates. And then you have Duck Hodges over there just like lacing him to Washington. I'm like, I don't get why you're so bad. And of course the Steelers have already had their show of OU people in Landry Jones, which was a consummate disappointment as well. And so it's tough. It's tough. I've been wanting Pittsburgh to draft a quarterback for a long time.
Oh, you must be high on the Spencer Rattler to the Steelers idea. It'd have to be pretty bad for that to happen, but I'm sure that's your dream scenario.
Yes, Spencer Rattler, Caleb Williams in the future. Who knows, man?
Awesome. Great stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, Kamiar Mehrabian from Crimson and Cream Machine. Thank you for joining us. Before we let you go, is there anything you want to plug?
Hey, man, you can find me on Twitter at KMehrabian CCM. You can find our podcast at the Crimson and Cream Machine podcast at Oklahoma Breakdown. And that's it. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Hey, it was our pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, man.
All right, Steeler fans, if you're listening on the podcast platform side, you can go ahead and click over to part 2 of this podcast. If you're listening on YouTube or Facebook, just hang tight. We'll be back in just a moment. Pittsburgh Steeler fans, it is time for the second half of the Curtain Call podcast. My name is Michael Beck, joined by Geoffrey Benedict. We are hanging out, having a little fun, talking about Oklahoma stud. I guess you made the NFL, so you're a stud. Regardless, Tre Norwood's the topic. Geoffrey, what was your original thoughts on that pick? For me, I was kind of like, who? But what did you think when that came down the pipeline?
I wanted a cornerback significantly earlier. So at that point, I was like, who is this guy? What's going on? I started watching film on him. I saw like that he's physical, but in like a grabby hand fighting, like fight for the ball in the air, could get a penalty, but more often than not, he just made it life miserable for people trying to catch the ball. I saw all of that, and he just reminded me of Cameron Sutton. And I looked at him like they are drafting him for Cameron Sutton's spot. Like that's the goal in mind, is that kind of role. So I'm positive on it. It's far enough down at 7th round that hopefully he'll dodge the Steelers drafting a cornerback jinx. So we'd all love to see a cornerback, be better, be really good there. Cameron Sutton, hopefully he takes that spot as the best drafted Steelers cornerback in recent history.
Hey, you know what? Looking at these draft picks, we know 2020 draft class, every single member made the team. The way the cards are kind of falling, it looks like the 2021 class is a really good shot of doing the same thing and having every single draft pick make the team. Honestly, I think it might come down to Norwood. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think every single one of these draft picks are making it?
Well, we'll see with Loudermilk. Defensive line there's so many of them.
5th round pick though.
I know. Like, and they traded up for him. I can't imagine them trading up for him, accepting that like he's not a polished thing and then letting him go before even giving him 1 year. So yeah, I think you're right. Norwood, that's a tough room simply because they have put so many names in to fill those spots. Like there's definite holes there. There's definite room. But they've thrown so many names in there with Killebrew, Mole, James Pierre is stepping up. Justin Lane's still hanging around.
About
Tre
6
Norwood.
Undrafted guys.
Yeah. And they're all, what's interesting to me is they're all very different. I know someone in the chat said, is Tre Norwood like a James Pierre? And my answer to that would be no. They're incredibly different. They're actually like opposites. Like James Pierre, if you think of James Pierre, think of like Joe Haden. Physical run stuffer. The technique is fabulous, just not super fast. And then you have Tre Norwood, who is a Cameron Sutton. He's going to play off. He's not, getting in the chest of wide receivers and hand fighting with them as much. He's looking to back up, read the play, and play the ball. So they're very different players. And then you've got like the undrafted kid from Michigan State that everyone's high on. He's a very different player. It's going to be very interesting, and this is one of the reasons I am excited for the preseason, because they're such different players, and I want to see them get out there and see who they can use and how.
So then, with that, who do you think the most likely rookie to get cut is?
I'd have to go with Norwood. Like, I think it's still probably him, just because, that room is crowded. He's a 7th round pick.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Just the way everything else has fallen. They haven't acquired another outside linebacker, so there's no way Roche's going anywhere. Jordan Berry would have to be, honestly, even if Jordan Berry's punting 60-yarders throughout the entire training camp, I think the Steelers have to take in consideration that he plays his best football when it's hot out, and he usually flops in the winter. And are they going to get rid of this punting stud like this top punting prospect since probably Daniel Sepulveda? Just let him go to market and sign somewhere else and just roll the dice on Jordan Berry. I just can't see it happening. So for that argument's sake, I would also agree that Norwood was probably the most likely cut of any of these rookie draft picks. Again, though, I have a feeling they'll all make the team, much like what we saw in 2020, which is incredible. 2 years in a row to have your entire draft class make the team. Last year was 6 picks. This year's 9. It would be incredible. But going back to the safety-specific talk, how do you think this safety depth chart is going to round out? Of course, you got Terrell Edmonds and Minkah Fitzpatrick at the top. Who are going to be the guys that back them up?
I think Arthur Millette is going to be in that discussion. I'm very interested to see if they put Miles Killebrew at safety or if they move him more like a Marcus Allen to where he's kind of a linebacker, kind of a safety. But that is a good question. And one of the interesting things we've seen is that the Steelers like to use depth cornerbacks in that role. Like when in 2020, when Terrell Edmunds would come off the field, it wasn't Sean Davis playing for him. It was Mike Hilton coming in. Like if they're in 7-man front, Mike Hilton wouldn't be on the field, but they'll take Terrell Edmunds off and put Mike Hilton at strong safety. They did the same thing with Cam Sutton a bit. So it's interesting because the depth chart like matters there, but when they take safeties off the field, they don't always replace them with safeties. It's more like, each individual player has kind of the roles that they can play, and then they kind of match that up. So it's like, okay, we need someone to go in there and play deep, zone defense. Let's send in Cameron Sutton. We need someone to be able to blitz from the strong safety spot, and we're taking Terrell Edmunds out, so let's make Mike Hilton will play strong safety. They really do more on role-based, and it's interesting because they also like to be able to switch players around. So you'll see Terrell Edmunds in the slot and Mike Hilton drop back in zone sometimes. It's just I don't know if they're just messing with the offense or seeing a matchup they prefer a different player to take on. It's so I still think Arthur Millay will be your number one backup safety, but I think he will also be like your dime back. So I'm gonna go with him primarily there, and then behind him, just I don't know if there really is another like backup safety, truly just a safety kind of player on this defense. They just kind of don't go for that right now.
Yeah, no, I totally see that as well. Now I'll put you on the spot, much like how I put our guest on the spot a little bit earlier. Who would you say the best Steelers defensive back is who is not named Minkah Fitzpatrick for 2021-22?
Joe Haden.
Still.
Yeah, Joe Haden. Until he proves otherwise, it's Joe Haden. Although I wanna jump in here. I'm a stats guy too, so I'm big on like recognizing small sample sizes. James Pierre didn't play that many snaps. But if you were to just take every single snap he played at cornerback and you were to compare it to the other Steeler cornerbacks we've had, man, you can make an argument his film looks better than Joe Haden. Like you could make the argument James Pierre looks just on film in that very small sample size like the best cornerback we've had since Ike Taylor. Like that's just his film was incredible. He's playing at a very high level. He just doesn't have great physical attributes. So with a caveat there that if James Pierre is what he showed last season, if he can turn that into a full season of play, I will change it to James Pierre. I don't think that's realistic to expect that. But at the same time, that's what he put on film, right? That's what he put on film. That's what he put on film. That's what he did on the field. So there's a chance that James Pierre could just be like pushing Joe Haden out the door after this season if he's that good again. That is really interesting, especially the way you put it at the end there. And I would agree that Joe Haden is probably the next best defensive back after Minkah Fitzpatrick. But of course, this is a contract year for Joe Haden. And of course, it's a DB-centric show tonight. Do you think Joe Haden's coming back? And before you answer, I'll throw my answer out there first because I think his vocalness in that locker room and how he's a leader and how he's respected by literally everyone in the NFL. Anyone that's ever talked to Joe Haden, played in the NFL, they all rave about him. How he's just the man. I feel like that affects things where you're going to want to bring him back because really vocal leaders outside of Cam Hayward for that defense. There's not a whole lot of loud guys like TJ Watt. From my understanding, he only talked to Bud Dupree and his brother. That was his kind of his circle on the Steelers. But when it comes to vocal leaders, of course you got Cam Hayward, but then Joe Haden's such a fixture. Do you think he gets re-signed even if James Pierre might take a step ahead of him? Is he someone that you have to bring back if he can still go? That's a good one.
He means
the thing is, I can't see Joe Haden moving into a reserve role. Like that guy has made money, right? Like he has, like, you listen to like how the Steelers, when the Steelers talk to each other, like Joe Haden's the rich guy, right? That's who he is. But if you look at it,
He's like the highest paid corner of all time. Yeah.
Like you get in there, he still got the good rookie deal. He got in before the slotting, and he got that big contract with Cleveland. They paid him a ton of money. I don't think he's the kind of guy who's going to be like, okay, I'll take a small deal and be a backup. Because he'd just be like, you know what? I'm done. Why would I do that? Because he also has a lot of pride. Like any like really good defensive back, you have to be that kind of guy who carries a chip, who's got a lot of pride, and he's gonna make sure he gets respected. That kind of a person. I don't see him taking a reduced role. Like, I think he's that guy that if he can't play outside anymore, then he's done. He's walking away from the game. So I'm leaning towards no, but I don't. There's also the problem that Joe Haden's in fantastic shape.
Oh yeah,
he is in incredible shape. You see his workout videos with that like footwork guru guy that he goes to that a lot of the players go. Cameron Sutton has videos with him now. Dude, the stuff he can still do, the level of training he has, if he's still playing like he did last year, you have to bring him back. He's just that good, and he is, like you said, he's that leader. He is that guy everyone looks up to, everyone respects. He is something else, man. I love Joe Haden, and so I'm gonna go with he comes back. I'm gonna go with the Steelers pay him a good amount of money and he's back.
I really hope so. You know what? When it comes to respected players across the NFL, number one, if you were to poll players and say who's the one guy you want to see win a championship before they retire, I think number one is going to be Larry Fitzgerald. Period. I'm not sure if there's anyone that's ever been more respected than Fitz. But number two, I bet you is Joe Haden. He is beloved in NFL circles, and really, I hope and pray he gets one before he hangs him up. And I really hope that's in Pittsburgh, of course. But before we move on to the other DBs, I pose you this: is Joe Haden a Hall of Famer right now as we sit here? Is he someone that would have to wait a while? Or
I was just thinking about that because you were saying about Joe Haden. We want him to win a Super Bowl, and we'd love it to be in Pittsburgh. I think Joe Haden is on that track. If you look at cornerbacks playing right now, the guys that were considered better than him, they didn't hold up. Right? It's such a hard position to play. For him to play it at the level he's played it for so long, outside of those few last years in Cleveland where they were a mess anyways. No one looked good on those defenses. He has a chance. And I think if the Steelers could somehow pull off even like a deep playoff run, something like that, you're helping his case, because his big problem is he's never been in the playoffs. Like, he never really gets that shot to be in the playoffs, and he didn't. He missed it again this year. And if you look at the Steelers' defense in the playoffs this year, or even the other games he missed, you could see the lack of Joe Haden makes an impact on this team. So I think he has a chance of it. But what I want to ask you back is, if he stays with the Steelers and retires, a Steeler ends up going to the Hall of Fame, what's the helmet?
Oh, it's got to be the Steelers. That's an easy one to me, because like, he took less money when he was released by the Browns to sign with the Steelers. There's better offers out there. I'm not sure the teams, but I know there were better offers. He loves Mike Tomlin. He said that multiple times, and honestly, I think he's kind of treated poorly by the Browns. So I couldn't see him putting a Browns, like, if this is like Cooperstown in Major League Baseball where you got to pick a hat. If that's how it did work, because I'm almost certain that's not how the NFL does their bus. Yeah. But if that's was the way they went about it, I think he would go in as a Steeler. He is also closing in on having like the same amount of years as a Brown as he is. This is year 5, I think, for him on the Steelers, and he played 7, I want to say, on the Cleveland Browns. As I see you search that up, he's closing. If he gets another deal, if he gets another 2-3 year deal, he might be a Steeler longer than he ever was a Brown. Do you have the numbers already?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. 2010 to 2016 for the Browns, 7 years there, 5 years with us.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I think that'd be a pretty big factor on it as well. And for one of the good guys, I think all the Steelers fans can say, let's get that dude a ring. He freaking deserves it. But
I would love for Joe Haden to go in to the Pro Football Hall of Fame repping the Steelers, like doing that, because that would mean, like, I mean, obviously the Browns had Joe Thomas, but the other best player of that era, the other best draft pick of that era would be Joe Haden, and he'd be going in as a Steeler.
Yeah, he just twists the knife a little bit.
Yeah, why did I mention how much I hate Cleveland? I don't know if I've ever mentioned that, but yeah.
What a dumb move, honestly. Like, when we look back, like, if the Browns had Joe Haden and like the last couple of years when they like turn it around, it would have.
One of the problems is they don't have cornerbacks who can play like him.
Like, Denzel Ward's pretty good, but I want to say he didn't show as much as he was as a rookie. But anyway, this isn't a Brown show. Let's not talk about them. Who cares about that team? Their dumb name and their ugly uniforms, whatever. Let's continue talking about defensive backs for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I want to bring up two guys here that have had a really good minicamp and a really good OTAs. You mentioned one of them a little bit earlier, but Antoine Brooks and James Pierre have been standouts. I know Mark Cavalli wrote a piece for The Athletic stating they're way up in terms of like their stock. A lot of people were saying they stood out. Are you high on these guys? Are you excited about hearing that they're having a really good offseason?
I'm really interested in Antoine Brooks, hearing good things about him, because he did play more snaps than James Pierre did. They were just all last season on defense. They were just all in one game. And it was the one game where the Steelers went in their dime package the most, and he was their dime back. Antoine Brooks Jr. was their dime back. He played a bunch of snaps against the Bengals because they were spreading everybody out and throwing all the time. But in that game, he showed he has some good blitzing. He's a very physical player, but at the same time, he doesn't quite have some of the coverage traits you need there. I know everyone talks about Mike Hilton wasn't the best in coverage, but this is a different level. Like, Mike Hilton wasn't the best coverage guy for a cornerback. Antoine Brooks Jr. isn't the best coverage guy as a safety, right? So them talking about him having a good camp is great news to me, because if he's improved his movement ability, like, I don't know if he worked. Sometimes players work with people, they get different fitness regime stuff. All of a sudden, they're a little more agile, a little better. If he's learned the defense really well to where he can become a valuable piece, I'd love to see it, because he was a playmaker in college, and I'd love to see that aspect out there. But he wasn't that guy in 2020. James Pierre, I mean, obviously, I've already said it. He was that guy. He absolutely was that guy. So I've said it before. Nothing they say good about him surprises me, because he was that good on film last season. I just can't wait for him. It's preseason. I want to see how they're using him, what they're asking him to do. That's all I care. That's what I want with James Pierre. Nothing they say during camp is going to surprise me. But I'm also glad we got good report on Tre Norwood from Terrell Austin, saying he picked up everything really well. So, I'm excited. I'm excited to see how they work it out, and I think we could just see this defensive backfield really not lose a step.
Seems like the only draft pick that isn't getting a ton of love right now is Dan Moore Jr., who apparently struggling a little bit to kind of pick up all the NFL stuff, but he's a project tackle to begin with. That is absolutely expected.
He's going to take a year. Yeah, he's going to take a year, and then we'll see what we got with him.
And he has no pressure to play at all. So by all means, I'm not worried about that. There is one other topic I want to get to, but this is a really good question from Andrew Wilbar. He asks if Ben were to retire, and even Joe Haden for that matter, what would you consider the bigger draft need, quarterback or cornerback? course, next year's draft class is loaded at corner. It's one of the stronger corner classes in a long time. There are a ton of quarterbacks, but they're not to the same skill level as we saw in this past draft class. So, Geoffrey, I pose it to you first. Would you be a quarterback in the first round or a corner? Quarter or corner?
Just going by need, I'd still go cornerback. Like, yeah, I'm thinking like quarterback's so important, but I think Mason Rudolph can be a guy for a year. He can be a guy. He's not the guy, you know. And when Ben leaves, Mason Rudolph is not the guy, but he is a guy. He can be a guy for a year or two. But man, if Joe Haden leaves, you would have Cameron Sutton left from that group. And that would be
it. Fast. Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking that Steven Nelson, Joe Haden, Mike Hilton, Cameron Sutton. All of a sudden, it's Cameron Sutton. You've got to bring in some. That's not James Pierre starting opposite him, and you're not going to do undrafted free agents and 7th round picks and
you have to sign someone.
Free agent castoffs for your entire cornerback room. You can't do that. You got to have somebody anchoring that room. So yeah, for me, it would be cornerback.
I think you kind of talked me out of corner with that. Yeah, I think you want someone that has skill, like, and the Steelers will have some money. I think you try to go sign a corner, and you try to sign Joe Haden, but after that, I think you want to sign a guy.
Oh.
When it comes to this quarterback class, though, like if they fall in love with someone and they're like, okay, we need to go get this guy. If you identify that quarterback, this league is a quarterback-driven league. You have to go get him. Like if that's, goodness, I don't know. If it is Spencer Rattler and we're like, all right, we need to trade heaven and earth to get the number 2 pick to get this guy or what have you, depending on how this all shakes out. I think you got to make the move. Like we knew the Steelers were really high on Patrick Mahomes. I don't know if they were ever close to pulling the trigger on a trade up because it wouldn't have made much sense with Ben
he was too high
where he was, but. We knew the Steelers brought him in for a ton of workouts and were interested in him, but it didn't work out. So clearly they know what they're doing when it comes to evaluating first-round talent when it comes to quarterbacks. They're not in position to take one, obviously, year in and year out when you have a Hall of Fame guy. But if they're looking at the right people, I'd want them to make a move up if they think they found the right guy. But outside of that,
can I jump in here with something?
Absolutely, go for it.
Because there's a comment that stood out to me here. Let me bring this up here. It says, it's from Lifelong Fan 07. I'd rather have a smart player than a talented player who doesn't have a smart brain. Talking about the secondary, this is a big shift because a guy like a Justin Lane, a guy like an Artie Burns, no longer fit this defense. That's what the Steelers used to be going for. If you look at who is excelling in the defense, it's not the big physical, fast, traits guys. It's Cameron Sutton. It's a Steven Nelson who was short and everyone thought was a slot cornerback. Then he's playing outside and he's great. Joe Haden, who despite, he's 32. Joe Haden's 32 years old. He's been in the NFL over a decade. He's not fast anymore. He was never a ridiculous athlete, and he's not the athlete he was anymore, but he's freaking smart, and he can play that position. Then you look at their draft in Tre Norwood. They're bringing in guys. They're looking for smart defensive backs. That is where this defense is going, and so I got to agree. That's what you got to look at is can they execute this defense? Because if we execute the coverage schemes that we've been running since Terrell Austin joined the Steelers, if you execute them well, this defense is going to be outstanding.
No, exactly. The last thing I did want to bring up for tonight's show, Geoffrey, of course, it's been covered in other shows, but Steelers brought in Trey Turner for a little interview and physical whatnot. Didn't result in a contract, but really the buzz was kind of worry about David DeCastro. What are your thoughts on this situation? Are you worried about it, or is this just due diligence that I suppose with the guys the Steelers have been bringing in recent weeks, maybe it's just like, all right, this is the list of guys if there is an injury. It could be that. I don't know if it is, but what are your thoughts on all this?
Well, let me go to his play last year. My hope And I think the Steelers' hope is David DeCastro was going to come back and be the guy he was at the start of the season. That week 5, I think it was week 5 against Philadelphia, he was injured. He was never the same when he came back. He was not the same guy. There's been reports that he was fully better, but he just wasn't. He had lost something there. He didn't care as much. Like, there's rumors. You always hear stuff like that. Like, maybe he's just done. He doesn't want to play anymore. But the question to me is, if that injury isn't healed, then he'll likely be the worst offensive lineman we have. The only guy that was worse than him when he was clearly not himself was J.C. Hassenauer, and that's a guy he was our third string center. He was a developmental guy. He was not supposed to play last season in the NFL at all, and there he was, starting. And David DeCastro wasn't much better, and that's just what a torso injury can do to a lineman who's not young anymore. If that's more the reality than, an injury that can heal and he can bounce back, then yeah, gosh, that'll be absolutely awful. Because looking at this line, you're hoping, Kendrick Green steps up, and that those 3 interior guys, Dotson, DeCastro, and Green, can really be the anchor of a line that turns the Steelers' fortunes around. If DeCastro isn't there, that's kind of a nightmare scenario. I mean, you're talking about Coward, you're talking about Haig, you're talking about cast-offs from other teams, hopefully being able to start. That's rough.
Yeah, and I feel like if DeCastro can't go, the Steelers probably try to work something to get some money back. If he were to retire, or if they were to cut him for whatever reason, then they would have some flexibility to bring in some more talent like a Trey Turner and kind of alleviate that pain. So at least there could be a possible out for this team. But as we are at the top of the hour here, Geoffrey, I do want to ask you if there's anything you want to plug on your way out. I know another TJ Watt to sack film room drop today, so make sure that people check that out. But is there anything else that we should keep our eyes on?
Yes, actually, our Vertex is running a little late this time because we're covering this exact topic. We're covering the loss of Mike Hilton and who we expect to replace him as the nickel back. I don't get into Tre Norwood in this one, but I get into Antoine Brooks Jr. and show actual film from when he played, some film from James Pierre, and some film of Mike Hilton. So if you're interested in seeing, what the buzz on Antoine Brooks Jr. is, you can see what he did last season. And see where the player he was as a rookie. That I think that's coming tomorrow, but we've had a lot of articles on the secondary, so they kind of pushed it back. But I believe that's coming out tomorrow.
Great stuff. And for everyone that has been asking, the Steelers from A to Z series breaking down the entire roster is back. We're on day 3 now. Myself and BTSC editor Dave Schofield are running it together this year, and if you just go to behindthesteelcurtain.com, you can find those articles under Steelers Trifecta. We're covering 3 players a day, and that series will end the first day of training camp. So a nice little bow on that. For getting through the entire roster, we get to start breaking down training camp news. Aside from all that, I want to make sure everyone's caught up to date on all of their behindthesteelcurtain.com podcasts. Wherever you're listening, be it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, what have you, wherever you're getting those podcasts, make sure you check out today's Let's Ride from Jeff Hartman. Of course, Wednesdays he answers your questions. Yesterday, my live mic kind of looked at some kind of ideas and some kind of talking points that I'd like the Steelers to hit offensively. Next week, we'll look at the defensive side of the football. Of course, the Scobros were on yesterday. And tomorrow, of course, the Steelers preview. I guess it's an all right show. Yeah, I'd still call this one the flagship. I mean, I don't know if those guys are watching, but I kind of want to pat myself on the back. It is what it is. But as always, thank you guys for tuning into the Curtain Call tonight. Before we get out, we did get a super chat here from Lifelong Fan 07 who puts $4.99 in the tip jar and says, super sticker. Thanks for that, Lifelong Fan 07. We will head out now Have a great night, ladies and gentlemen, and we will see you soon.